Hello everybody and welcome to the UK Skype. I'm here with Gwen and Peter. So hello Duane and hello Ava and hello everybody on board. And I'm going to start with passing the mic to Peter. Then Gwen will come in next, and I see Pierce is on. So I'll bring Pierce in thirdly if he has anything to share or add or ask questions or whatever. So passing it to Peter then.
Hello everybody once again. Just to say tonight I've got a few dreams and a few things I want to ask Duane again. Start with the dreams. Four rather not especially exciting or very intelligible dreams, but I thought they're the ones that were very striking I've had over the last week, and remember them quite clearly when I woke up. The first one concerns yet again my old dad. It seemed to be, must have been when I was younger and still living at home before I got married. And my dad and his colleagues at the work where he worked, which is the Commer truck factory in Luton, where we used to live at that time, which is a town about 30 miles north of London. And he worked in the experimental department. His title was experimental fitter, in fact. And what they used to do was to develop the vehicles to get them right before they went into production. Excuse me. And on this occasion, in this dream, apparently they were having a lot of trouble with this fire engine. I don't know if that's what you call them in America, but a fire truck or fire tender or some such. But it's and they couldn't get the thing. There's something wrong with the water system on it or something. They couldn't get it right. And my dad come home and was sort of saying about this to my mum, and there's not really much to this dream really. But my mother then gave me a cup of tea, which is only half full, and I just remarked on this fact, and she topped it up from her cup, which is very odd. And that was it really, which is rather a bit mundane and pointless, but I thought I'd mention it anyway because it was quite vivid.
Yes, it's well, you know, what's the idea? We'll just start backwards a little bit here. What's the idea of tea time? It's kind of like take a break, basically. And you know, again, we go through this, and you know, we go back and forth with our personal self. And yes, it's dealing with a vehicle again. And your dad was creative, so this again, there's the idea of being creative with the vehicle. Which is like your five bodies. This is where your vehicles are in creation, and taking a look always at what you're deciding and what you're focusing on. So things are going to go according to that. Now, you know, we've all been brought up in our lifestyle on Earth in the physical realm, and you know, for the most part, we just do what basically almost everybody else does. And so we're thinking, we're self-convinced, well, this is normal. Okay. Is it? Or is there more? But you decide. It's your adventure. So again, adjustments are being made accordingly. So this is where you start to look at, you learn about your five bodies. You start to look at more than just your personal self. that you're self-convinced by. You see, this starts your journey. And so the vehicle just represents, it's like if you were going to take a road trip. You want to make that vehicle okay so that, you can take the road trip. It's something along those lines, you see, Peter? Because again, as you start off in this, it's a huge journey to get through ourselves. Because again, we're so self-convinced about everything, and at the same time, we do our routines, but now little by little, through the experience of taking a look at the attitudes we have, after a while, you look at them every moment. You learn to sort things out. You start to see your real awareness from this personal self and the 5 bodies you created, but you have to decide that. You're going to have experiences, but you decide how you're going to recognize them. And I know what you mean. It seems very mundane, but really it entails the whole personal self, because all the 5 bodies are basically housed in the physical body. And we relate to all the 5 bodies accordingly, even though these other bodies are on other levels or in other dimensions. We still basically relate to the physical body only. So again, there you go. That's what's going on. And as you go through, just like a work day, you've done certain things. Every day you do a little bit. Every night you do something. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like tea time. It's kind of like take a break, okay, until the next time. Something along those lines, okay?
Right, okay, thanks. Second dream, slightly more sinister one in some ways. I was in this town centre. I don't know where it was particularly, just any town centre in the dream world. And I was feeling very, very depressed and down for some reason. I had a bad day, and I just felt awful. And oddly, in this town centre, there was what can I only describe as a gas chamber, a sort of a outside room that sat there, and I felt the inclination. Oh well, I've had enough of this, and I went and sat inside it, rather waiting for somebody to come and switch it on. I think. That sounds awful, but I'm just telling it as it happened. And I sat there and I sort of walked around, and there was a window in it, and I looked outside, and suddenly the grey day that it had been, it was all suddenly beautiful sunshine, and I thought, what the hell am I doing in here? And I came out, and that was the end of that one.
Yeah, those are fun, aren't they? So again, we go back and forth with our experiences. Also, we're shown certain things. There's a comparison there, and we're realistically, the atmosphere we're in here in the physical is a gas chamber. We're being gassed. We're being poisoned, and so in a way, you're seeing the experience of the physical body. Then all of a sudden, you see a window, you look out, you see the sunshine, and then you recognize and realize, well, what am I doing in here? So again, these little experiences start to spark your adventure to start to recognize your real awareness. You see, you made the move, you decided. Now, some people may just stay in there and be afraid to go outside in the sun. It just depends, but you decided to go outside. But I see it as, and there's many ways to look at it. There's not just one way. So that just kind of gives you a hint. But we're in this atmosphere. We're in an atmospheric bubble here, and we're being gassed, and that's exactly what it is. So when you step outside, that's like the real universe is in your real awareness. And now the journey is, the adventure is, do you want to recognize more? So you had the experience. And again, you're always the decider. So something along those lines.
Okay, thanks. All right, now dream number 3, which concerned myself and my big sister, which actually reminds us what I meant to mention to you before. You're often referring to Peter Pan, and the funny thing is, my sister's name's Wendy, and she's my elder sister. And when she was little, she was always promised that if she ever had a little brother, he'd be called Peter after her favourite storybook hero, Peter Pan. So just sort of rather silly, by the way. I was named after Peter Pan. Anyway, the dream concerned myself and my sister. We were again in some sort of town square place I didn't recognise. And there were sort of meals going on. There was sort of you sort of help yourself to. I suppose you had to pay for them somewhere, but there was some sort of racking with all meals and things. And we both picked up a tray and a plate each, and we had these meals. We sort of picked all the stuff out and put on the plates. And we were starting to walk away, I presume, taking it somewhere to pay for it. And suddenly mine sort of leapt out my hand, or just turned upside down. Stuff went all over the road and everywhere. And of course, everybody was looking round, and I felt a complete twit. And that was really the end of it. But
So the idea was, you're speaking there a little fast. When you talk, things kind of blend together. So you went to this place and you had some food or something. Was that it?
Yeah, sorry. We were carrying back these trays of food.
Okay.
And for some reason, mine decided to turn itself over and tip all the contents all over the ground, much to the interest of passers-by and my embarrassment.
In the experience, how did you feel about that? How did you see that, or what was the idea that you had, or did you have any?
Yeah, but basically a combination of embarrassment and dismay, I suppose, at losing the meal.
Okay. Well, that could be that. Also, it's a type of sharing, isn't it? So the birds and everything can eat what you've decided, just like. There's many ways to look at it, just like what you're learning here. You see, this is what you're eating, is you're eating this up. In other words, what's being presented to you. So that's a way to look at it too. And sometimes we have the attitude that it's a little bit too much for us and we're not interested, so we dump it. So again, it just depends upon, look over the experience, the food that you chose. And maybe it was old ideas that all of a sudden you realized you didn't want. So, something along those lines, you'll know I would say that's more of a personal experience with the attitudes and ideas that you have, you see?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, final dream, you'll be glad to know. This time I was in an airport sort of lounge area where people sit and stand around waiting for the planes. And I've got a big area, so people all sort of milling around. There's a big open space in the middle. And so it's a bit of a amusing one, really. This one. I was suddenly aware this naked woman came sailing in and sort of dancing around all the people and all around the room. And then she suddenly came up to me and threw her arms around me, which was very nice. And all this sort of took time. And when I sort of broke away, as it were, and she disappeared, I suddenly realised, I missed the plane, and because Gwen and I think the two boys, as they were then, had walked off towards where the plane's coming, and I got to the gate, and the man there refused me and said, "You're too late, it's gone." And that's when I woke up.
Well, there seems to be a fun part of the experience, doesn't it? And so again, yes. And so this person that, again, when you're having these experiences, there's the real you, which is not always recognized, and there's the personal self too with the attitudes, which is understandable because we're a blend. And the naked gal dancing around, well, she's exposing herself, you see? And so just by the very fact of how she's displaying herself, she's trying to get some attention, and then she comes to you because, again, you're learning this here, you see. And so, again, the personal self comes in. That's where you're a little reluctant. It's like, oh, okay, what's going on here? And I understand we have these things, and I have a personal self too, and I wake up sometimes from certain experiences and it's like, well, what is that? But actually, she was enticing you, okay? And so you see the end result is that there's more than what the personal self decides. And yes, it's an out of the ordinary experience, which would seem kind of funny because all of a sudden the personal self is considering, oh, I have a wife and kids and whatever. But it's not about that. You see, it's about a view with your real awareness, and the flight is just that, taking the trip. So, and that's okay. You can redo it. Imagine it and redo it. So this time you missed it, but you can redo that and take the flight again. You see, in other words, the flight represents getting beyond yourself.
Okay, thanks for that. Now, just one or two things I'd like to ask you about that have come to mind since we last spoke. First of all, reading your books, as I am avidly, you mentioned about the universal files, which I think is very, very interesting. And you say how these are far more, I suppose, complete or comprehensive compared to the more well-known, well, by name, Akashic records. And I wondered, does that mean that the Akashic records aren't worth sort of seeking out? Or they're some sort of cosmic Wikipedia or something, because they're not very accurate? Or are they still worth looking for when we're not perhaps advanced enough to be able to access the universal files?
Well, everything's workable. And just like what we have here, which is, we have what we're getting from the media, textbooks, and everything else, which, aside from our own personal experiences, is lots of times just a lot of distortion, made up stuff that sounds good. And so you go through a process. Now, the Akashic records, they pertain to experiences basically in creation, in different parts of creation, but not all of it, because creation continues to be creative. And so things are recorded accordingly, just like they are here. You have people recording things and putting things in the computers and whatever, but it's not all accurate. Now, the universal files are an accurate position of any experience that's already had, and this is where the universal files are to be recognized. It's not that they're just a big storehouse of stuff, because they're in the real universes, and when you want to access certain things, it is a recognition that you're accessing. So this is, I just refer to them like that because, again, it's something for the literal sense. But yes, everything already is. And so, this is the fun part of it. So everything else, like the Akashic records and what we have here and all through creation, things are a particular, and they can be tweaked a little bit or whatever, and that's fine too. Everything is workable. You figure it out eventually, because we're all in creation to eventually recognize our real awareness. So again, learning to look to your real awareness and seeing all of these things in creation as kind of secondary. In other words, they're there, but everything is in your real awareness. And once you start to recognize that, there will be a comparison there, you see, between the two, which will help your literal self out. But, it's like going to the library. You decide to go there, pick out the books, read them, cross-reference, whatever. This becomes your journey to figure your personal self out, and then eventually the real awareness to be able to see the two, and then you can supersede all those self-convinced restrictions of the personal self. So, yeah, these things act as references to yourself and then back and forth. So there you go. You kind of get the idea, but once you learn to go direct with the isness and recognize that, all right, then you won't need any of these other things. They'll just be available, and the boys use them as reference, like the real side when you're having your so-called dream experiences or whatever. They use these things to spark you, just like, when your parents raised you, they brought you certain things, read you certain books, etc., to kind of get you going with, being able to handle your own life at a certain point, and then from there you decide. So, yes, that's kind of it, young man.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. Next point really was a bit of an odd one, perhaps. Is it true that places or locations can actually be considered to be evil or to have sort of bad vibes? A place I've got particularly in mind is going back again to Loch Ness, because aside from the monsters, it's always had a very sinister reputation by the locals and everybody else. It's got the reputation that it never gives up its dead, and there's a very famous example in the 1930s, 1932, I think, when Lady Hambro is a member of the famous London merchant banking family, was on a boat which caught fire, and she jumped overboard and promptly disappeared and was never seen again, alive or dead. And in fact, there's a triangular-shaped monument up on the hillside, approximately opposite where it happened. And there's other examples of this sort of thing, and also the fact that on the southern side of the loch, there's a little sort of a community called Boleskin, where there's actually a cemetery on one side, the side of, next to the loch. On the other side, if you look up the hill, you can see this big old house, Boleskin House, where Alistair Crowley apparently lived for quite a long while, I think in the early part of the 20th century, and carried on with his nefarious sort of activities, which gave the area a sort of bad name. A lot of people think it's sort of there's some evil atmosphere around there. It's not something I've felt myself, but I'm very sensitive to things like that anyway. But so I just wondered if there is any truth in that, whether places can be sort of imbued with sort of evil because of things that have happened there over the years.
Well, that's going to be the agreement of the people there, because they, like a village or a town or a city or the world, you have an individual and you have group consciousness, and not necessarily the stories, you see. So again, it's like, with what I'm presenting here, there's a lot of stories out there. And, this is, I'm bad, I'm an imposter, I'm evil, I'm the dark side or whatever. See, those are stories. And for the most part, so much of the time, people go with the stories because it's kind of fun. It's like when we were kids, we scared ourselves with funny stories and spooky. It's like, oh, don't go over to Mr. Bob's house because he's got witches in his house, in his closet, and whatever. People make up stories, and about the Loch Ness monster. Well, see it from the so-called Loch Ness monster. Is it a monster? It's just a body type, and this creature, this individual, is just in there swimming around. That's all he's doing. But on the outside, everybody's got stories about him, like he's this or that. You see? And so it's learning to be a little more objective and freeing ourselves from these things. But if it's a village like where Loch Ness is or whatever, that's going to depend upon the people and their attitude. It might be a really happy village, but they've got these stories. That's like they have certain books in the library, but it's really, you can feel, you can experience and sense the consciousness of the place, and you decide, you see. So you learn to separate the so-called fallacy from the reality of what's taking place, just with yourself and other situations and whatever. But even if it is an evil place, the consciousness is really bad, you're still the decider, you see. You decide to be part of that or not, or go somewhere else. You see, to me, it's kind of like a smoking room. I don't want to be in the room with other people smoking, so I just leave. And they can do whatever they want, so it's kind of along those lines, and that's everywhere. So you start to learn to sense things if you decide to. But again, most people will go along with the stories of, the place like New York's called the Big Apple. Okay, so what does that mean? Is it a big apple? Do they have apples there? Well, maybe they do in the markets. But again, these are stories and ideas that become, in a way, they become their own actuality because there's so much agreement there. Now you start to see how things solidify in creation, and how we're consciously and unconsciously, especially agreeable to these things, and we keep being roped into these positions that it's like we wonder, this is where on the real side we have certain experiences. It's like, well, gee, what am I doing here? Because unconsciously you don't see how there's an agreement with certain situations that the conscious mind doesn't. So it's learning a whole lot about yourself, isn't it? So you start to see the difference between stories and, again, your awareness, what you decide, and the consciousness that's created there. There's so much going on in creation, isn't there?
Right, okay, thanks.